We all have a story to tell. Let's tell yours. Welcome to the Intellectual People Podcast with your host, Jason. Come together and listen to journey stories and more from interesting people. Welcome your host, Jason.
So today I have Erin from Erin's Audio Corner. How are you doing today, Erin?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you having me on. This is fun.
Thanks for coming. So, Erin, if you would, take me back to how you actually got involved in audio and your path.
Oh, okay. So I'll start from the younger ages where driving down the road with my mom, listening to the radio. I was born in 82, I can tell you that. And everything that was on the radio back then was like 80s pop. So I grew up listening to Madonna, Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie. I mean, everything, Boy George. So I like, my mom is a big music lover, and music was always on the radio. It was always on the turntable. It was always on somewhere, wherever we were. And, that love of music just kind of followed me on through, I guess, my teenage years, when it switched from like, I don't know if you remember the early 90s, it was all country. Even Alan Jackson had the Gone Country song, because everybody in the U.S. was listening to country music back then. So I was listening to country back then, and then it went to Rage Against the Machine. And then as I got a little bit older, I started defaulting back to 80s music again. So, but it really all stems from just a deep love of music. And then I got into car audio. I got my first subwoofers when I was, I think, my first year in college. And I got introduced to the sound quality side of car audio, not just the bass and the boom boom side, but the actual sound quality where you try to create a hi-fi 2-channel stereo in your car, which I know sounds crazy to most people, but it can be done to a really good degree, and as you know. And then, that love kind of transferred to my engineering side. So my degree is in aerospace engineering, and, with that tech-mindedness, I guess, I wanted to understand how things work. So I got interested in testing speakers. I was given the opportunity to use a Klippel machine back in like 2010 or 2011 for a website, which is DIY Mobile Audio, which is, I don't know, it's a ghost or it's a shell of its former self at this point. But back in the day, man, that site was great for information as far as the science of sound. And that leapfrogged me into a little bit of home audio. So what I do now is I test basically everything under the sun with an objective mindset, and the goal to correlate objective data with what you hear, not necessarily from the standpoint of, this speaker sounds great because it's quote unquote flat, as so many people often think a speaker has to be. It's really a lot more than that. It's a lot more involved. It's about the interaction of, the room to the speaker. And then there's certainly the aspects of aesthetics. People will be drawn to a certain brand because it looks nice. But my goal is more in the vein of not necessarily trying to tell you what's, good or bad, or I guess I should say the best or the most preferred speaker ever. My goal is more along the lines of, one, helping determine what junk is. So if a speaker is just garbage, we can get rid of that off the table immediately. And then two, you're left with your options as far as what you would want to buy based on the science and the data that I've already provided you in previous testing. So for example, if I test speaker A and that you like that, then maybe a year down the line, I test another speaker that, in my opinion, and according to the data, it measures about the same and it sounds roughly the same. Then you say, okay, well, that would be a good option. And that's really where things are for me as far as right now.
Okay. So,
oh yeah, I didn't even mention I have a website where I post all this stuff at, and a YouTube channel as well.
And everything is ErinsAudioCorner.com.
Yeah, it's all Erin's Audio Corner. So if you search for that, you should find my website, and then you should find my YouTube channel as well. Yeah.
Great. So I have to say that when I briefly met you, gosh, it's got to be almost a decade ago now, up in North Carolina, I was amazed at, or I should say really surprised, that the stereotype of car audio is just a lot of bass and a lot of boom, right?
Right.
That's the stereotype.
That's how we all start, at least.
Right. And what it struck me, because I, for years, have been measuring my home audio, my 2-channel system, and, all the acoustic treatments, and really trying to perfect it, and multi-subs and all the great things that you can do now in home audio. And I don't believe it was you, but I believe it was one of the people in the group shows up with a mic array. And he's measuring car audio systems for his buddies to help tune them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is shocking. I can't even get people to let me come in their house to measure just to show them what they have, let alone actually tune it. Right.
Right.
And I said, this is shocking. So I went on that website that you mentioned, that forum, DIY Mobile, and I started realizing these guys are more technical than most home audio people. And it really, really surprised me how technical they are. And then the more and more I started seeing your posts of what you're involved in, I was like, okay, he gets it, but he's in mobile audio. It's really a shame that he's not involved in home audio. Well, fast forward and here you are, and you're into it deep now, very deep. And it's admirable. It really is.
Well, I appreciate that. And I will note real fast, number one, I think who you met that day was probably John Kaiser, who's a very intelligent guy, and very indebted to car audio. And then secondly, the talk about how technical car audio can be. It's because it has to be. If you want good sound in a car, it's infinitely harder to get good sound in a car than it ever is in a home. So you've got to understand how sound works. You've got to understand how to be able to measure. You've got to understand how to correlate measurements with what you hear, especially in the car, because, you could have for example, if you've got a dip in the response, you would assume that, let's say you measure your left speaker and your right speaker, and your left speaker shows a dip in response. You get in the car and you listen, you're expecting to hear less energy coming from the left speaker because that's where the dip is. But as it turns out, there's actually all the energy is drawn straight toward that speaker because you're sitting in a phase null. And that's something that in home audio, I don't think you pick up on as easily. But in car audio, if you want to have a good system, you have to figure out what the cause of that is. And in that case, it's the car itself, and there's really nothing you can do about it. But you could spend a long time trying to beat yourself over the head trying to understand that kind of information.
I've always said that the car is the worst possible stereo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? I think you can take the best speaker in the world, put it in the car. And it's not just because it's in a car, but when you have a stereo speaker, like a home speaker, you have it put on a baffle, like a flat baffle. Then you have the little speaker hanging out from the baffle. And I know my animations are terrible, but hopefully you get the point. But we know when you put a speaker in a car, basically everything in the car then becomes the baffle. The dash becomes the baffle. The windshield becomes the baffle. The side windows everything becomes the baffle at that point, So you've really got to build the speaker inside the car.
What made you transition to home audio then? How did you get involved in home audio?
I think honestly, boredom, because, and I still love car audio. I compete in it. I go and support the different meets and the shows. And I know it sounds weird to people who don't know, but there are car audio competitions, and judges will sit in the car and listen to test tracks, and they'll determine this sounds more like it should to me in this car than it does in another car. And they have a score sheet, and it's a whole big thing.
Is there any correlation in these car audio meets between the objective side and the subjective side? So the judge sits in the car, listens to it, puts a score on it, and they also take an array, shoot the car to see how it measures?
Nope. I wish there were.
Is that something, do you think, that you can bring to the table?
I don't know. I think the way that car audio is set up right now, that it's not very open to having that. So they do have an aspect called RTA, but that is actually set up to where you will try to achieve I think it's set up at different volumes because I don't actually compete in this aspect, but they will try to achieve a flat line response. And I think the higher you can go in output, so as a tiebreaker, whoever can get the highest at that flat line would win. But for example, some ways that people will achieve the flat response is they will shut an entire right side down, or they'll shut all the speakers off except for one and use their EQ and try to tweak it to make it flat. I mean, so that's going to sound like garbage. Right. So there is no correlation between that sub aspect or that sub competition and the actual sound quality listening competition. Luckily, they are two separate events. So you can go to a show, you can compete in quote RTA, and you can compete in quote sound quality, and they are two distinct things.
It's too bad that they don't have another category that is like a full objective category where we measure it and blindly let the judges listen before they see measurements of the car shot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that it would be really hard to quantify a quote unquote good objective system in car audio just because of all the issues and all the peaks and dips. It would take a lot of effort for somebody to sit down and try to go through how are we going to judge or how are we going to score this car based on objective metrics, actual true objective metrics.
I'm not saying to score it that way. I guess I'm more along the lines of measure it as another parameter so it's documented, and then that would just go along with the scorecard.
Right. Yeah,
Not
I see what you're saying.
necessarily judging it based on the measurements, even though in home audio, like what you're doing, we do measure, we do judge something based on its measurements, right?
Right.
I believe it's a perfect segue, but I believe that a lot of people are jaded by going subjective all the time. People for so long have listened subjectively and ignored objective data.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So what they think is neutral really is not neutral.
Gotcha.
Yes. A preferred sound because that's what they've evolved to over the years. However, they've never heard a true neutral speaker that measures neutral, right? Such as something that's behind me, a JBL M2, that measures exceptionally well, or the Revels that you have measured, which we'll get into. So what happens is when they hear something like this, they immediately, majority of the time, don't like it.
Yeah.
And they don't like it because it's so far different away from what they've basically have become accustomed to.
Right.
Because it sounds different and it's different very far away from what they're used to, it's not good.
Yep. So I know exactly what you're saying. To me, that's a phrase I call it, preference versus reference. What do you prefer, and what would a true reference system sound like? And a lot of the times they can be completely different. And I will say right up front that I don't believe, because I've been asked, and not that I'm like the de facto standard, I'm just speaking off experience here. I don't believe that there is a quote unquote perfect speaker, and never minding the aspect of tonal balance. Some people may like a certain sound, some people may not like another, but there's, room interaction, there's dispersion patterns horizontally and vertically. There's all those things that kind of come into play in different settings. And then there's the preference of what somebody likes. Some people prefer a speaker that doesn't have a large, horizontal spread, a very, very wide sound stage and bouncing off the walls. They don't like that. Other people like that because it gives them more of a sense of soundstage width from the reflection from the side wall. So I don't think there's a perfect one, but I totally agree that a lot of people have trained themselves to listen to junk. So when they hear something that really is a really good speaker, they don't accept it as a good speaker because that's not the norm to them,
Right. And the other part is that I'm not saying that anybody should listen to a speaker that I like, right? Which is a constant directivity. I'm not saying that.
Right.
However, there are ways to make those types of speakers and tailor them and color them to your liking.
Yeah.
Right.
After the fact, right.
After the fact. And ultimately, they still measure well. That is the critical part here, is that you're starting out with something that is properly designed and you're coloring it to your taste rather than start with something that's mediocre and you're trying to make it so it meets what you think is good and neutral. Meanwhile, it's so far off, it's not even funny.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and another example too is using objective measurements to help you identify problems. I mean, resonances in cabinets always show up in a simple impedance test. And for $99, well, maybe it's not 99 anymore. Maybe it's a little bit more than that. But this is the Dayton Woofter tester, which I'll plan to do a little video on soon. But for this little dude, which you can buy from Parts Express, you can sweep any speaker that you order and just look for little blips in the impedance. And if you follow my channel, you've probably seen me talk about it before. If you don't, then you will see me talk about them. Not you will follow my channel, because that sounds ominous. But yeah, I guess I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here, is that my point being, you can have data that will show you glaring issues, and almost all the time you're going to hear those issues, especially when you understand what to look for. You know, I've had a set of Klipsch Heresy 4s recently, and I'm not trying to make anybody upset. I know a lot of people love the sound of those speakers. They're not for me, but never minding the coloration of the response itself, their actual resonance within the cabinet at 110 hertz, and then it's again somewhere around the 600 hertz region, was enough to make me, I would never buy them solely because of those issues. I mean, the 110 hertz resonance, you hear just lights up, male vocals just light up that speaker, and it's so annoying. And that's not something, I mean, you could tame it with EQ, but you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of cabinet resonances with simple EQ, you know?
Mechanical problem.
Right, exactly. So that's an example of a speaker that, you know, a lot of people like subjectively. Objectively, it's not great. And in my opinion, I didn't like it either. But what are you going to do? You know, so all you can really do is kind of educate people as to what they're hearing and hope that they understand it. And then, you know, if they want to keep listening to it, that's fine. It's not hurting my feelings, you know, but I'm just here to provide the information.
Sure. So what are you doing to provide excellent measurements? What you're doing, and then we'll get into what you're going to be doing.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm breaking my back for one thing. No, actually, ironically, you know, 2020 was a crappy year for everybody. COVID going on, you know, everybody was stuck at home. A lot of people lost their jobs. I was fortunate to be, for it to not have affected me, but because I was teleworking a lot of the time, I was saving myself 2 hours a day. So I had extra time. And with that, you know, extra time, I decided I was going to start getting into loudspeaker measurement. So I reached out to Klippel, and Klippel is basically the de facto name in loudspeaker measurement and analysis. And I talked to them about some of their products. I wanted to get one particular thing, which I'm sure we'll get to shortly, but it was way too far to my price range. And Amir from Audio Science Review had also recently purchased it. So I thought, well, there's no need for me to get into that right now. So I got, you know, more budget level hardware and software. I'll call it budget level. It's still kind of expensive.
Do you mind telling us how much that is?
Oh man, I think I had, goodness, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I don't mind telling you, I'm just trying to remember because I hate to misquote it, but it was the total product is I want to say it was about 30 to 40,000. For the Klippel, for the Klippel distortion analyzer, and then all of the modules. That's the retail price. If I pulled up the price sheet now, I think that's what it would go for. Because I got a laser, I got a test stand to mount just a speaker drive unit to, if I want to test a subwoofer to find out how much excursion it has, for example, per an IEC standard.
And that's laser controlled, correct?
Well,
laser measurement.
It's not, well, so the laser is used to determine how much excursion the speaker has. Yeah. Right. So it can tell you with a high degree of accuracy, you know, it's 9 millimeters one-way linear excursion, or it's 5. And a lot of the times, you know, when you test let's say you're a car audio enthusiast and you want to buy a subwoofer and you're trying to make the most you can out of your dollar. So you've got $100, you go on Amazon, you see what's there. This subwoofer says it has 30 millimeters one-way excursion. This subwoofer says it has 10. Which one are you going to get? You're going to get the 30 millimeter one, right? Well, when you test it, you find out it's got 5, you know, and that's
often.
Well, I've not found something as egregious as that, but I've found many cases where the specs are about double. And that really is not necessarily, they're not lying. It's just that manufacturers measure excursion capabilities differently. And a lot of them will measure it based on the actual physical dimensions of the speaker, like how far the voice coil can travel outside of the gap or something like that. And the way that Klippel's set up is it's set to an IEC standard, which is determined based on two different ways. One is for mid-range, mid-bass tweeters, it would be 10% total harmonic distortion, or IMD. Subwoofers is 20% total harmonic distortion. And when you test per the IEC standard with the Klippel machine, then that gives you a very apples to apples comparison. So if I go to manufacturer A, B, C, or D, if they're all tested the same way, then I know I can trust that measurement. But the problem is they're all probably tested 4 different ways, you know, and you don't know. So that's part of my goal with just the drive unit measurements, is to provide a single source of measurement. That way, if you're comparing apples, or that way you're comparing two different units, you're comparing apples to apples.
How many drive units have you measured
over the years? Oh gosh. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I tried to think about it a couple of weeks ago, and it's funny. Somebody asked me, or somebody had posted on, I think ASR even, and said, I'm looking for blah, blah, blah information. And then one of my buddies chimed in and said, hey, Erin tested the speaker back in 2012. And I totally forgot about that. Wow. Like I literally forgot about that. I would say over 100 in my time, which it sounds like a lot, but I guess it's really not quite that many. I took about a 2-year hiatus due to some health things in my family. And then just got booted up again last January. So, and that's where I'm at with drive units. And then with loudspeakers, it's different. It's a real process. I've got a video on my YouTube channel, and it's at least 10 hours. I mean, bare minimum, it takes me 10 hours to measure, because I've got to measure 140 different points in space. So I've got to do ground plane, and then I've got to take the speaker outside, and I've got to measure it off the ground. It took me 4 days to measure the revel, and dude, it nearly killed me. Lifting that speaker up, I was climbing up a ladder. That's I think 50 or so pound speaker, which isn't that heavy, but when you're holding it over your shoulder and climbing up a 6-foot ladder to put it on top of something, right? That's a game changer.
Erin, can you explain to the listeners why you actually have to take it off the ground and put it up in the air?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, when you listen to a speaker, you listen to the speaker in the room. What you want to measure when you measure a speaker is you want to measure just the raw speaker. You don't want any interaction with the room itself. And standard measurements cannot give you that, because time travels very, very quickly. So what you would do is you would take the speaker outside and you would measure it. Ideally, it's the way I've been doing it. You would measure it off the ground, and that would give you a first reflection at a very low frequency. So basically you could say that everything above that frequency, for example, 300 hertz, is an accurate point of measurement, and everything below that is inaccurate. So in order to combat the inaccuracy, you have to measure in a different way, which is considered a ground plane measurement. And when you do that, you've got 2 sets of measurements, and you can basically combine them, and then you have the whole 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz span of good, accurate data. But like I say, that's a 10-hour process for me to do right now.
Did you write a script that will compile all the data? Is that how you do it?
Right. So with the Klippel, I measure each measurement. Like I said, it's 70 measurements for each type of measurement. So what I mean by that is, for the ground plane measurement, it's 70 measurements, which is 10 degrees all the way around the speaker horizontally, and 10 degrees all the way around the speaker vertically. And then I take all those measurement data, and then I have a MATLAB script that I wrote up, and it just takes all that data and it puts it out into a graph the way I want it put out, and does a lot of other stuff too. And the reason I wrote the script is just because it's so much easier for me to say, here's all the data, do what I told you to do with it. It took me a long time to write the scripts, but we got there.
And I should point out that you've done this all alone, correct? You don't have anybody write. You don't have programmers. You don't have people helping measure other than maybe a family member, but it's 100% you.
Yeah. It's all done by myself. It's kind of ironic. I took a new job a few years ago, and I was doing a lot of post-processing on data, and I'd been used to just using Excel, and my coworker was using MATLAB, and I saw how fast he was getting stuff done. And I think about the second week of being there, my boss had asked me to do something. It was like the 80th time I'd done basically the same thing with just something a little bit different. And I had to rebuild everything again. And I said, all right, I'm going to learn MATLAB. So thanks to my newer job, or my current job, I was able to put that information toward measurement. So it kind of worked out.
Yeah, it worked out very well. So you've decided to now up your game in the measurement system, correct?
Yeah. I guess I can go ahead. You want me to go ahead and talk about it then? All right. So
I want to say one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
That I want people to try to understand this personal commitment that you're making to basically every audiophile out there and every music lover out there, right? Yeah. Because this is, some people buy extravagant things, materialistic things for themselves personally that is fun and enjoyable, and I hope that you enjoy this and it stays fun, right? Mm-hmm. However, tell people about the financial commitment that this machine is, and tell us what it is.
Okay. So the machine I got is Klippel Near Field Scanner. And what it does is it measures, I mentioned previously that it takes me about 10 hours at least to multiple days to measure a speaker. This does it in about 2.5 hours, and it is fully automated. You would go in, and I don't have it yet. I'm just going off of what I know and what I've seen in their videos and read through their manual so far. But you put a speaker on a stand, it will rotate an arm that has a microphone attached to it around the speaker. I'll go this way, and it measures it in the near field. And the reason it does that in the near field is because, and near field means like the microphone is right up next to the speaker. The reason for that is because you have a higher signal to noise ratio, which means that like if there's something going on around you, any extraneous noise won't really detriment the measurement itself. So it takes thousands of measurements over a span of a couple hours, and then it takes all that information and it goes blah, 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 and it spits it out into a nice set of data that I don't really have to do anything with. There's no need for me to post-process anything. The ultimate, I guess, the final deal here is that it does what takes me days, maybe even weeks to do, and it does it in a few hours. And that's a huge time saver for me, but it is a big commitment. Yes.
So do manufacturers that don't own the Klippel NFS, how do they measure their speakers?
I wish I knew. I'm not sure that all of them do. Now, I know that some will send theirs off to measurement companies. So there's the National Research Council in Canada, the NRC. And then I know that there's Workwind, which, gosh, I can't remember if they're in Michigan or Wisconsin. They moved like some of the past couple of years, but they're in the northern United States, and they'll measure a speaker for a fee, and they actually do a lot of R&D as well. So if you are a manufacturer or you trying to be a manufacturer and you've got a design that you want implemented, you would send the speaker off to them, have them measurement, and then for a fee, which I think is $1,500 right now for a full near field scanner set of measurements, you would send that speaker to them. They would measure it and then give you the results. And in my opinion, that's a no-brainer. I mean, if you're investing money, just send the speaker to them, have them measure it, give you the qualified data, and then you can post it on your website for everybody to see.
Right. So let me ask you this, Erin. What do you think about the speaker manufacturers that use any? There's no need to mention a name, but use measurement software, and they take basically 5 to 20 measurements inside their shop with the speaker on the floor. What do you think that data is good for?
So I'm a very gray area person. I am not black and white, and that's kind of getting into a different thing here. But I think that for some cases it's probably adequate, and then for other cases it's more harmful than it is helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does a speaker designer that wants to produce a product as good as they can, right? What do they really need, in your opinion?
Tom?
Of course.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Erin. Do you believe that if two different manufacturers' speaker measure the same, they sound the same?
That question is it depends. And I think the answer is there's not going to be a speaker that ever measures the exact same. Number one, because if you had the same manufacturer producing the exact same speaker, there's still going to be quality control, not issues, but just little things. I mean, a drive unit, a tweeter is probably not going to measure the exact same, between every single run in its production. And there's probably going to be some variance. So if you want to take the absolutist standpoint, there will never be, in my opinion, a speaker that measures the exact same every single time. That's not going to happen.
Sure.
But the other factor is, when we measure, we're not just measuring one way, we're measuring all sorts of ways. And the idea is that, a lot of people will provide what is called an on-axis response only. And that is you looking right at the speaker and measuring the response of the speaker coming right at you. But what the Klippel does, what is it, CTA 2034 does, is to promote a set of measurements that will help define the sound radiation of a speaker in all. So not just in front of it looking dead at it, but to the side of it and even behind it. And it takes all that information and it rolls it up into a different set of curves known as early reflection curves, which will be basically the frontal hemisphere of a speaker and, a portion of its vertical window. Then there's a listening window, which is, a smaller frontal hemisphere and a smaller vertical window. And then there's sound power, which is all the sound that the speaker radiates frontward, sideways, and backwards. So when you're talking about, if I take this measurement and compare it to this measurement, if they measure the same, are they going to sound the same? Well, for example, you can make two speakers measure the exact same, maybe not the exact same, but really dang close on axis, but the rest of their response is going to be completely different. And if you don't have that knowledge, if you don't understand that it's not just what a speaker points out in one direction, but it's all directions that hits the speaker or that hits the walls and then comes back and hits your ears, that's what matters. You care about everything that speaker emits. And if you go into it with only the knowledge of on-axis response and you say these two, they measure the same, but they don't sound the same, so measurements are invalid, well, you don't know the whole story. And frankly, that's just ignorant. And I can't blame people who don't know that, because the industry doesn't do a great job. Manufacturers don't do a great job of putting that information out there. There are certainly a few who do. Revel, as you mentioned, JBL, anything JBL does, they're very hardcore on that, because that's where the science came from, JBL's house. It's the house that JBL built. And then there are others as well that I'm just blanking on right now, but there's a lot of companies that maybe don't abide by that, or they frankly just don't want you to know about it, because that's an extra cost to them. That's an extra expense to them, more time, more R&D needed. And then there's an accountability factor where if they're not providing you with that information, then how does that make them look? So it's almost like, in my opinion, at least, in some ways it could influence the customer by giving them the knowledge of speaker measurements and how they are useful, So if they tell you this is the thing you not necessarily need, but it's good to have, and they don't provide that to you, then that looks bad on them. So why would they ever just tell you about it to begin with? They just be silent on it and hope you buy their product.
Thank you for that explanation. I hope that makes sense to everybody. It's fantastic.
That's just my opinion, by the way.
Understood. I understand. So you've talked about this Klippel NFS. How much is it?
Well, it really depends, okay? Because there's a lot of people out there that they may need different things. But if you're looking to get what I got, ballpark, it's about $100K USD. And that's the Klippel Distortion Analyzer, or Klippel Analyzer 3. That's one piece of hardware. Then there's the robotic thing, the whole thing that you put the speaker on the stand. It has a robot arm that goes around it, measured up all over the place. That's almost 50,000 euro. So I don't know what the conversion is for that. And then there's all the software that goes along with it that you need to make use of the measurements.
And does that include software updates, yearly updates?
Yes,
it does.
Yeah. As far as I know, it better. Yeah. I'll just put it this way. I've never had any issues getting updates when I previously owned the Klippel. Not even going back to like the one I just got in last January,
right?
But the one I got back in like 2010 or 2011, whenever it was, I used that for 3 or 4 or 5 years and never any issues getting updates. So as long as you buy the license to that module, I think it's okay, but don't quote me on that. Klippel may come down and shoot me because I said the wrong thing, but I think it's okay.
Okay. So you've made $100,000 commitment into a piece of hardware and software that at this point is a hobby. It's a passion, correct?
Yeah. I'm not in the industry at all. I do have friends because obviously if you're this far into the hobby, you've got friends in the industry. So I certainly have friends in the industry. But no, I'm not affiliated with the hobby in any way other than just trying to push it forward. I mean, it really is. Yeah, you said it perfectly. It's not even just a hobby anymore. It's a true passion. I mean, it's what I love to do. And that's the thing about it, man. It melds the love of just music, like, when I get off here, I'm going to go in my living room and, I'm going to fire up some music and start folding some laundry. Like, I can't do anything without listening to music, and I think a lot of people in society are that way as well, but it melds that love of music with my love of technology and understanding how things work. And I really want to be able to provide that information. And I feel like that's a big gap in the hobby, in the community, in general. There's so many reviewers, and a lot of these guys I'm friends with too. They're doing a great job. They just don't have the means or maybe the technical know-how to get into the actual measurements. And I feel like that's a good area where I can fill a role,
Right. And that's what I want to get into now. So you have $100,000 commitment with this hardware and software, and you have the technical capability of offering it, right? And that is a very, very big thing that you have the ability and the know-how, right? Because I think it's safe to say that you could give nearly any reviewer, except for maybe a couple that are engineers, that NFS. And the reality is they couldn't do it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what they do, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And for you, it's even looking up standards, test standards. You understand test standards and how to interpret them as well.
Well, I understand them. It's like when I had to go and get a loan for the house. I read up on it. I understood it. I was like, dude, I could do this for a living. And 3 weeks later, I forgot every single thing. If you ask me anything, like I remember doing my taxes and it was saying, did you buy points? And I was like, what? I don't even remember what a point is. And like had to go like look up my paperwork, just to remind myself. So yeah, within reason, I can do things. And I will say that, because I'm not an engineer, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because sometimes I may focus on things that don't really matter. A true loudspeaker engineer may say, well, dude, you're obsessing over something that doesn't matter. But on the flip side, I've kind of taken a step back from it, where I'm not, I guess, so tainted as to believe that, because this is my design, that it's got to be perfect, so there's that double-edged sword of that as well. But I will say, and, not to brag on myself, but I'm perfectly happy to admit when there's something I don't know, and I admit that a lot of the time. And I know where to go to for help. That's the thing. I mean, I know a lot of people, and if there's something I don't understand, then I know who to go to help me out with that.
So what is your goal in terms of testing with the NFS?
Education. Education
to the public.
Education to the public, yes. To the audio community, to anybody coming in. I wish I had unlimited hours in the week, to do all sorts of speakers, but I've also got a family and a loving wife. Shout out to my wife. If she ever watches this, thank you. And to my kid, thank you. But ultimately the goal is really just to help improve, not just education for the community or for the public, but even within, engineering, the loudspeaker engineers who are putting stuff out there, and, they don't have the ability to measure speaker, which again, going back to send it to Workman for $1,500, get it done the right way. But that's a different topic, I suppose. As well as there's a lot of speakers that are out there that are, $400 and they're garbage. And there's a lot of speakers that are out there that are $200 and they're really darn good, So, I mean, if my ideal goal would be, I will have measured every speaker, I will have laid ears on every speaker in my home theater room as well as my living room to give me different environments, and provided people with my assessment, and then also provide that information out there for everybody who wants it. So loudspeaker engineers, I should say, will come in and say, hey, that bit of information is useful to me, or, hey, you assume this, but let me explain this to you. And man, it's just a group think effort for me. Everybody gets involved, gets their hands dirty, and we all learn from the experience.
And it will be a public free database that people...
Absolutely. Always. Yeah. Okay. The only thing is, at some point, my website is starting to get a little bit costly, so I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that. But I also really enjoy doing the YouTube thing, because I feel like I don't like typing stuff. I don't like reading. I know that's like a sin, but I don't read. Yeah, I can't read. I have all these really smartest people I know, two things in common. They read and they play a musical instrument. And I don't do any of those. So, I can't do it either. I'm just scraping by, man. But yeah, no, I've not moved to solely, but I also incorporate the YouTube aspect as well. So when my reviews on my YouTube reviews, what I'll do when I get to the data portion of the review is I'll pull up my website and I'll walk through the data with you and note some of the things that I think are noteworthy.
Okay. And your cost of your website's getting large because of the data? Is that?
Yeah. It's it's right now. So I'll put it, when I first started it, my graphics were sized way too large because I wanted it to be, if somebody clicked on the link, it would blow up and they could just every nitty gritty detail.
Right.
But my first bill came in at like 130 something bucks for the month. And I was like, good Lord. So I talked to my friend who is my web, I won't say designer, but he's the guy who helped me set it up and taught me how to use this stuff. And so I'm building it all myself. He said, man, your photos are like 5 megabytes a piece. You're an idiot. What are you doing? So I scaled them all down. The price lately has been 20 to 30 a month, but it's starting to grow as I get more and more data and more people go and look at it. So at some point that's going to have to be something I'm going to have to figure out. I don't know if I'm going to be able to archive these and put them on like an FTP somewhere or what, but we'll see. I'll burn that bridge when I get there.
Are you going to involve any local colleges?
Honestly, I've never thought about it. I could, but my area is really big into NASA, and the Army is really big around here. And there's really no sound engineering.
Okay.
If there were, then absolutely. But that's something worthwhile to look into. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to be open to manufacturers sending you speakers?
No. Well, let me back up. Yes, for loans. Like, so if there's a product that I want to review and I reach out to them, then I'm taking the effort, because here's the deal. For me to test something, there's only really 3 ways of getting it. I buy it myself, a fellow audiophile loans it to me, or the manufacturer loans it to me. And that's it. So for example, I've got a set of Dutch and Dutch 8C speakers. They're about $12K for the pair. And there's absolutely no way that I would ever be able to afford. I mean, honest to goodness, if I go on Amazon and I buy a speaker today to try to review, I'm going to be looking at the $200 to $300 ballpark, because that's really all I can afford, month to month. That's really it. Sure. So for those expensive ones, there's just no way that I can afford them. But that's the cool thing about it. I know some people will say, well, you're getting, a manufacturer's loaning this to you, so you're going to be biased. Well, dude, that's what the data's for. Because if I review it and I say X, Y, or Z about this speaker, and then later on I review a speaker that's very similar and I say something completely different, then you say, hey man, you need to get it together. You're not doing something right over there, So to me, that's what the data is for in my reviews, is not just for people to learn from, but also self-accountability, and I think that is sorely lacking in the review community.
Agree. And I want to get into that a little bit, but in the meantime, so you're not going to offer measurements to manufacturers if they're designing a speaker, for instance.
Correct.
And they want to send it to you, even for pay.
Nope.
That is
I'm not doing it. No, they'll have to go to Workwin.
Really?
Yep. I'm not doing that. I don't want to get in. And one reason, if for no other reason, is because I can't give you the years of experience of R&D that somebody like Workwin can. Your money, if I'm being honest, is better spent with somebody like that. I view myself much more as a test engineer than I do a loudspeaker engineer or a transducer engineer, And like I said before, I know just enough for me to relay the data. But if there's a problem with it, and we want to talk about how to improve it, I'm not going to have the time to sit down and build a passive crossover or to go in and simulate models. And I just don't have the time. And honestly, I don't have the desire. My heart's not in building a speaker as much as it is understanding the science of how we hear what we hear and correlating that to products that are out there on the market today.
Okay. And if there was I don't want to mention any names, but there's a few one-man bands, if you will, that are very, very good.
Yeah.
Right. And if they wanted to use it because they just want to get tests done, but of course that $1,500 for a test session is possibly too much.
Right.
You're still not open to
that. The only thing I'm going to test is something that is available on the market the day you send it to me.
Okay.
I'm not doing any R&D or anything like that. Yeah. Just because there's all sorts of reasons for that. Probably many that I can't even fathom right now. And that's not something I really want to get into. So, but I will say I think I would make the exception for like a DIY, like a group community thing. Like, so there's the DIY sound group, where they've got the, do you know what I'm talking about? I can't even think about them, like the 1099s and all that. Yeah. All that kind of stuff. I would be happy if somebody said, dude, I came up with this idea, and they tell me that they're going to not make it for sale, but they're just going to post the plans out, so people can build it and replicate it themselves by ordering the parts and piecing it together. I'm 100% happy to test that and post it. That way everybody knows how it performs. But as far as doing things for pay or doing things for manufacturing, stuff like that, no, that's not where I'm at.
Okay. Can the NFS measure open baffle speakers?
I don't see why it couldn't, but that is a challenge that I'll face when I get there, I suppose. Okay. And I don't see why it couldn't, though.
Ported subwoofers?
Yeah, subwoofers all day. Right.
All day. And is there a diameter limitation?
Honestly, I'm not sure, because like the largest subwoofers I'd imagine I would probably be testing on average are going to be maybe like the 15 to 18 inch, and anything larger than that is probably going to have to stay on the ground. I just physically won't be able to lift it up onto the platform, because I think the platform is about 5 feet off the ground. But having said that, ground plane measurements are very, very easy for subwoofers. There's not a lot of science to it, and it's just one axis of measurement, so most likely I'm still going to be doing those outside unless it's just windy or rainy for weeks and I can't get it done and I need to go ahead and get the speaker back out to the owner.
Okay. I think I know exactly the tool that you need as a present for whenever your birthday is.
Okay.
I think I need to figure out how to fund that for you.
Okay.
We need to get you a like an H-frame with a winch in the middle, right? And then you can speaker, lift it right up, bring it outside, sling it all the way up, 5, 6 off. It'd be perfect.
Yeah, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing too about the near field scanner, and this is one of those. I'm just so excited that I'm getting what I'm getting right now that I'm not trying to worry about too far in the future. It's one of those like, when I get there, I'll get there. Sure. But Amir has I don't know if it's 2 feet. It surely can't be 2 meters, but it's an extension to allow you to measure speakers that are very tall. Okay. And I don't recall the exact height limit that I'm limited to for the near field scanner as is, but it will still measure tower speakers. But if I want to go like really, really tall, I would have to get that. But the size of my garage is limited to 10 feet anyway. Okay. And that's where I'm testing. But my garage is actually insulated. So as far as temperatures go, I'm going to stay within that 70 degree plus or minus 9 degree Fahrenheit window that is, written about in the standard. But what I'm thinking about doing is building the NFS on a movable platform. So when I get to that point, I can just put that thing on I don't know the correct term, but I'm thinking of like those industrial pallet movers, something like that, where I can crank it up and I can move it out of the garage into the driveway and measure it. And then I can move it back in, but we'll see.
Must love you.
Huh?
Your neighbors must really love you.
Dude, I was testing the clip speaker and he came out and I was kind of chit chatting with him and he said, well, I didn't bother you or anything, did I? Cause he kind of knows what I do. And I was like, no, not at all. And then we actually had a chat and I got to explain to him about directivity, like how the speaker sounds as you move on and off axis, above and below it. And I don't know, it's pretty neat. I got really great neighbors. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So when are you planning on having this NFS set up?
So I just sent the payment for the shipping dues this morning. And I'm guessing they're probably going to get back to me. I think they're working like a staggered schedule just because of COVID. It seems like I get a reply about every other day or so. So I'm hoping I'll hear back maybe tomorrow, but probably maybe Monday or Tuesday and about shipping information. And then I don't know how long it'll take to get here, but I'm hoping within the end of the month, maybe. Well, we'll see.
I have to ask. So you mentioned that Amir at Audio Science Review has one.
Yeah. Why did I get one?
Correct.
Because I like doing things my own way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you believe that you'll be doing it differently than
him? No. I just do. I'm interested in different things, and Amir has his work cut out for him. So if, for example, I wanted to see how something performed, well, I could send it to Amir, but he may be backed up for 3 months, Right. But more than that, I'm already doing all these measurements anyway. For me, this is just a way to take it to the next level, allow me to have more throughput, more accuracy, and do what I want to do, kind of control my own destiny rather than depending on somebody else to do something for me,
Do you believe that the NFS antiquates anechoic chambers?
Okay, so I don't have the personal knowledge or the experience to speak on that. I will say that the data and the marketing literature certainly implies that much information. Yes. So I would say that based on that, yes. Because the anechoic chambers, they're good up to us or down to a certain frequency, but then depending on the size of the room and the absorption panels and all that stuff, usually I'm thinking like below 100 hertz, maybe the nicer ones, maybe below 80 hertz, they're not dependable. And you have to build a correction filter or a correction file, I guess, for that room. But the problem is that not all speakers radiate in the exact same manner. So one speaker's correct, or the correction for that room may not transfer as well for one speaker as it does another speaker. At least that's how it's been explained to me, and that's kind of my understanding of things. So as far as I know, yeah, the NFS will anechoic the anechoic chamber. Yes.
It's impressive, isn't it? When you think about it, right?
Dude, the science. I keep thinking of the lyric from Rocket Man, Elton John's Rocket Man, all the science I don't understand. It's just my job 5 days a week. Like, that's what I think when I go to try to read it and try to understand it. And there's a thread on ASR about, how it works, how near field separation and holography works. And, I'm an engineer, but I'm an engineer because I'm not a mathematician. So those dudes are on other levels. Like, I'm just a lowly engineer, right?
I get it.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Has Amir been good with this decision?
With his,
well, no.
Does he know that I have one?
Yeah.
I don't think he knows that I have one yet, but I have asked him, and I told him I was thinking about getting one. He gave me some insight because I asked him about, the size of his, did I say garage? It's in his garage, right?
Oh,
but his garage is huge from kind of what I understand. I mean, it's got like an open ceiling or something like that. But yeah, I asked him some questions about it. So I haven't told him today that, dude, it's a done deal. I'm getting one, but I know that I've talked to him about it and told him that I was trying to get one, and he gave me some insight and some useful information as far as me acquiring one. So
he was supportive.
I would say so. Yeah.
So will you present data differently, and will you post data differently than ASR does?
Yeah, and I have been. I mean, I'll probably post the data the same way that I have been posting it. Okay. Because I do some extra things that ASR doesn't do right now. And I don't know, I mean, Amir's doing so much, I don't know if he'll spend the time to do those extra things. And so those extra things will be, I do transducer testing. He doesn't do that. Right. I do max SPL testing. He doesn't do that. These are separate modules, separate hardware that you've got to have in order to do those things. And he's not doing those things, but he's also doing he's doing electronics testing. Now he's doing headphone testing. So I think dude's got his hands full. I think anybody who's asking him, I remember when he initially got the near field scanner, people were saying, well, why don't you add this capability and this capability? And having been down that road before, when you're testing something and you're like, dude, I'm providing you all this information for free, and all you guys are doing is complaining. Yep. I can relate. So I remember stepping in and kind of saying, why don't you guys back off, kind of give him a break. But yeah, he's doing so much. I don't think he's going to get to a lot of things that I'm doing. Certainly not the transducer. I don't see him ever testing transducers. I just don't, not speaking for him, I just don't see him doing that. But then I like to present data in different ways as well. So I write MATLAB scripts to present data in certain ways, and I'll keep doing that just because that's the way that I like doing it. But there will be a lot of overlap as far as the information that the Klippel spits out automatically. I mean, it's spinorama data where it measures the on-axis, the off-axis response, the sound power, all those different bits of measurement. It will automate that and put it into a certain graph. That was a lot of the legwork for my scripts in MATLAB that they're going to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just of no use anymore. So I won't be using those anymore. But there will be overlap. There will not be overlap.
Will you try to take a controlled sample and both measure it to make sure that you're both outputting the same?
Honestly, I hadn't thought about that. That's something we could do, but yeah, I'll think about that. Yeah. Right now I have a set of KEF R3s, and he has measured those. So I was thinking I'll probably measure those first just to make sure everything looks all right. And then I have another set of speakers here from having measured them previously, that I trust the measurements on, so I can look at those as well. But yeah, I might reach out to him and ask him about that. I'll think about it.
How many NFS systems are there in the world? Do you know?
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that myself, Amir have one. I think, is it Magico has one? Warquin obviously has one. And there was a fellow that I saw that I can't remember the company he worked for, posting in one of the Facebook groups. It was a DIY loudspeaker group. He mentioned that he had purchased one as well for his company.
Okay.
But as far as, just regular old Joe's owning one, I got to imagine that it's Amir and me only, and that's it.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised at that.
I'm not either. I'm surprised that I have one, or I'm getting one.
What does your wife think?
She thinks I'm crazy.
She does.
Yeah, but she's fully supportive. She gets it, man. She knows that this is my passion, and it's always been my passion. She's partly to blame because when I was into car audio, I had two 10-inch Rockford Fosgate subwoofers in my Explorer, and I got my first real job as an engineering intern or co-op And for General Electric in Louisville, Kentucky, if anybody's from that area, I worked at Appliance Park. Hey, Appliance Park. Before I got my first check, she had come up to visit me, and I went to this audio shop up there. Long story short, she cut the check for my first hi-fi car stereo system, and I paid her back. But if it weren't for that, I don't know, man. I might not be here today.
Wow.
So I'm blaming on her.
So we can thank her.
Yeah.
And you can blame her. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't want to ask you, where does Erin's Audio Corner go? Because we know where they're going. The question is, what is the most challenging part for you?
That might require some inflection. I think. Okay. So maybe just a little bit of a history. So when I got the Klippel last year and started measuring speakers, I said, I'm going to start a new website. I'm going to post the data there. I'm going to start YouTube because I feel like there's a real big hole there on YouTube. Because right now there's no measurements on YouTube. It's all, hey, I heard this and this is what I think, and that's it. And you're left with that. You're just left with a subjective interpretation with no, what I call again, accountability. And I feel like I could fill that niche. So that's why I want to start that. Kind of it's all a learning process for me, man. I mean, I go back and look at the YouTube videos I first made in June or July, and I think, oh Lord, just from the production quality of them. And I'm not trying, some of these guys have incredible production quality.
Absolutely.
I don't have the time to dedicate myself to learning how to run Adobe Premiere Pro and all that stuff. I mean, I'm doing the best I can, and I learn a little bit as I go, and it's improving over time. So that's kind of a challenge, but I think two main challenges, I guess, to really get into it. Number one is just the measurement process. Me having to do everything manually, it takes forever. But another one, and this is more personal, is I guess my reactionary state to how people reply to my reviews when they don't agree with my assessment. And it's hard for me not to take some things personally, or it was, when I first started doing this, when I would post a review of a speaker that wasn't good, and then I had a whole fan base coming at me, attacking me, and I would take it, I would get angry at them. And I had a recent experience with that, and I had a talk with Joe Intel, who does reviews, and he's one of the more subjective oriented guys, but he does do in-room measurements. And shout out to Joe and Shauna and Michael Youthman, all at the Daily Hi-Fi. Those guys they've done so much for me in just a few chats. They've taught me, you got to let stuff go. You can't take stuff personally. People aren't going to agree with everything you say. It's audio at the end of the day. You keep doing what you're trying to do, and your channel will grow, your message will get out there, and you'll grow as a person. And that's actually, in the past couple months, that's really what's happened. And so that was a big challenge for me, is just kind of getting over that hurdle of being able to not deal with, the haters, I guess, so to speak.
So you bring up a really good point about all of these subjective reviewers, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with them. I've been critical against them as well in the past. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. And I've grown about it as well, because I've finally have realized that audio is similar to religion and politics. You're just not,
it really is.
You're not going to change someone's opinion, right?
Right.
And it's unfortunate in audio, because the other two, I have no desire to try to change anybody's opinion. However, it's more about educating somebody in audio so they really understand that there is science behind it.
Exactly.
True science behind it. That so many people in this industry, Floyd Toole, Earl Geddes, Todd Welty, I mean, these people have really done incredible things, and there's others as well.
Right.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's a very good point. It's not, I like exactly what you said. And when you were saying it, I was thinking it's about education. It's not about trying to convince you that this sounds good and this sounds bad. It's about educating you on what you hear and what you're buying,
right,
and making you a better informed purchase maker.
So one of the issues that I've tried to bring up to some of these subjective reviewers, and as you've mentioned, there's a couple that have production quality that is similar to TV show quality.
Oh, it's outstanding.
It's mind-boggling to me, right? They are so good at what they do, and some of them are graphic designers, and they're kind of in that industry, right? And I'm not, and I don't claim to be a production guy. For me, this has been difficult, okay? Just because I really don't know about lighting and all of this stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, obviously neither do I. I'm lighting my bald head up here.
So in the end, these reviewers have something quite special from that regard, that they're able to really produce a fantastic set, right? Although the subject is great, the review is obviously very subjective.
Yes.
Right. And the presentation is subjective as well. What they have of production quality is fantastic. So what I have always wondered, why don't one of them, and some of these people have 50,000 and more,
100,000
followers, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would they not align with someone that can do the objective side for them? Right?
Yeah.
So they can put all of their subjective thoughts and still present it however they want. However, they also cater to that other side of the objective side, because the ultimate goal here is to hopefully give an honest opinion to everybody of what they subjectively think, also what data and science shows from the objective side, but at the same time, in a way, production quality that is so high level that people like myself, I'm not really capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And yet they are. So why not, if they could just tie that in with someone like yourself to do the objective side, why would they not do it? So the question for you is, would you work with them to enable that?
Yeah.
They
I
had
think so.
speaker X that they were going to do a subjective review on, but they wanted to have objective data. Would you perform the testing that you do? And they obviously would give credit where credit is due.
Right.
You would provide them with the objective data.
Yeah, I would be game for that. It would have to be somebody who I respect, because I'll be honest, and I'm not going to name names, but there are some of these guys that I just, having watched a number of their videos, I don't respect what they're doing, because I feel like they're doing some things in a gosh, I hate to be negative. I'll just put it this way. There are some guys who I would not work with, and there are many that I think I would be willing to work with. I'll just say that.
Who would be your number one to work with?
Well, I mentioned Joe Intel a minute ago. It's kind of weird, man. It's just like the dude messaged me one day, and I don't even remember how it got kicked off now, but he asked me a question of some sort, and then he called me on Facebook Messenger, and I was like, well, this is different. I'm going to answer the phone. So I answered the phone, and we just started chatting. Dude, I walked my dog probably the longest she's ever had a walk in her life, because I just kept walking the street back and forth because I didn't want to go home and drive my wife nuts with my stereo conversation. But I don't know, it was just a really good conversation. And then he had me on his daily hi-fi thing, and I got to meet, those other two guys that I mentioned, Shauna, who's Techno Dad, and then Michael, who is Youthman on YouTube. And those guys were just so welcoming. And the cool thing about this is, and I think it kind of goes into another thing about just self-growth, is it's hard sometimes when you're in something, when you're in like a hobby or a community, and you're trying to provide subject matter. It's hard sometimes not to view people as competition. And even myself, I've gotten that way, like I've looked at people and thought, they're not doing it right, but working with those guys has taught me, man, there's plenty of information here for everybody. And now it's about, I'm going to do my thing, and hopefully what I do will influence enough people to go ask these other guys, hey, can you do this too? And then maybe they'll approach me, or maybe they'll go to Workwin. But at the end of the day, the goal would be, to provide the information for everybody. And the other thing too is, I don't know why some of these subjective guys wouldn't want that data. Maybe they're not aware of that maybe their mind just isn't geared toward objective data, but I would think you would want that information for your own edification.
Right. And I agree with you. And one in particular, I believe has started shifting that way more. Mm-hmm. However, I think part of the issue is that, look, we all talk to other people, and we all talk to people that are involved that we might think they really understand what's going on, right? Because they've been a speaker designer for 20 years. However, they haven't been at the highest level, and they really don't have the ultimate knowledge in crossover design, right? And I'm not talking about buying a program and plugging in numbers until it looks, it models it until it looks flat, and then assembling something on a breadboard, putting it in, taking a measurement, it matches, it looks good. And for the majority, it's good enough, as they say, right?
Right.
I'm talking to really minimize parts and really create something that's as good as it truly can be, right? Yeah. That somebody that really understands it. And I think when you get involved with people like that, you tend to overlook what might really matter, hence the reason why power cables and cables in general become almost more important, right? Yeah. And I don't want to even get into that, because that's certainly not what I'm ultimately about. Yeah. And I don't want it to be a debate, because the reality is there is a place for stuff like that in certain circumstances and certain use cases, I'll say.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right. But it's certainly not the way to tune a system. That's for sure.
I agree with that too.
To tune it to perfection.
Right. I would agree with that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's what you do when you've done everything else and you're really bored because your system measures so exceptionally well. That's the kind of stuff you tinker with, right?
You're right. That's the next level stuff.
Right. Because what else are you going to do to leave? Yeah. Right.
Or just go buy more stuff.
Right. I mean, I have a friend, his room is impressive. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. And his system is impressive. And he builds DIY gear just because he's kind of bored now.
Yeah.
Nothing else that's fun, because he's reached the point with his room and his speakers and his system. There's nowhere else to go, right? It was custom built, custom designed. It measures. I've never seen a room measure this well. And he just builds equipment just to kind of feed his curiosity now, right?
That's cool.
Yeah. So getting back to it, yeah, I mean, there's certain things that one might want to do to just tinker, but it's certainly not the way. So I guess the long story is, I hope that you're able to convince some of these reviewers that have exceptional production quality to use some objective data from you, and then tell the whole story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's, and I hadn't really considered doing that until you asked. So you're bringing up some good things to think about for me as well. But I think now is a good point to mention this. And I've mentioned this to a couple of people recently. I really don't like the way that the audio community is split into factions between the subjective and the objective. I mean, it's like politics. It really is, in relation to left wing and right wing. I mean, you've got your guys who are diehard objective only, and you've got your other guys who are measurements don't tell you anything. And there's very few people in the middle. And I'm thinking, let's all just get in the middle. Like, we can all hang out here. Like, I'm not saying you have to, look at every single graph I post. And I'm not saying that you have to listen to a speaker objective only. Like, let's just join up in the middle, because there's a lot of common ground here between us. And the thing that concerns me with a lot of the reviews or reviewers that I've seen, some of them have even gone to the point of saying and specifically mentioning that, objective data, not really important. And that bothers me, because these guys have, 50,000 plus, 100,000 plus subscribers. And they're telling people that the science isn't real, or there really isn't a science, and there's no way you can measure a speaker to predict what you're going to hear. And I can tell you from my personal experience that that's untrue. That's not correct at all. I can take my measurements. I can predict when I'm going to measure in my room. And lo and behold, I measure almost the exact same thing that the outdoor measurements predicted that I was going to hear in my room. I mean, within like plus or minus 1 or 2 dB. And dude, imagine the power of that. If you can say, in general, this is a sound that I prefer. This is the response that's predicted in my room. And now I've got this purchasing decision to make, and I've got this information. Now I know which one is most likely going to be the better fit for me, rather than me just guessing $2,000 worth of speakers and hoping for the best, you know? Right. And people always say, no matter what, at the end of the day, no matter what the objective measurements show, no matter what I say, you need to be buying a speaker from a place where you can take it back if you don't like it. That's number one. If you're making an investment in something like that, make sure that you're going to be happy with it. And a lot of people too will not just buy speakers for their sound, but because of their look. For some people, it's a status thing. For some people, it's, you know, art deco or deco, you know, I mean, it's more than just the sound. So there's certainly many different areas that the community can fall into together, but the data is still important no matter where you side, you know, with subjective measurements or objective measurements. So
do you know if Joe and Tell lives in proximity to you by any chance?
No, he's in California and I'm in North Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah, because if he were, man, I have a feeling that me and that dude would probably be hanging out on a weekend basis.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking was it would be incredible to have someone like that local.
Yeah.
Then they could truly do the production. And what you could do is production educational videos, right? So you would do the measurements outside, then you'd go inside and you'd show how you're making a speaker predict the measurement inside versus outside, right?
Yeah.
And you could still do that. There's obviously nothing stopping you to do that.
Probably wouldn't look nearly as good.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
I know.
So the question is, how can you leverage their skill, right, in order to help produce something like that?
Right.
Because I think ultimately you both will grow from it. And I mean, not only intellectually,
right,
but also your channels will grow. And the hope that I have is that ultimately more people are educated about it and we can decrease the subjective listening and garbage that comes out so many times, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of it. It's hard to weed through the good and the bad. And I will say that some of these guys, you know, even though I wouldn't buy anything that they told me to buy, I still watch them because I feel like they're very passionate. Even though I question their hearing, they're very passionate about what they're doing, and I can appreciate that and I can respect that.
Absolutely.
You know, and some of them I don't feel like are lying. Now I will say that others, and obviously there's no way to ever prove this, but others I feel like they're just doing it for the check, you know, not necessarily from the company, but you know, like I operate off affiliate links. So if I review something that's, you know, good or bad, I'll post an affiliate link on Amazon and I get 4%. Well, 4% on, you know, $100 speaker, that's not much, guys. You know, that's not putting a dent in my actual costs. And I've also put affiliate links for speakers that I've said, do not buy this speaker. Like I flat out said, this is a speaker that I can't stand. I would never recommend anybody buy this, but if you want to, here's an affiliate link. But I do feel like sometimes there are people who will just, you know, say anything positive they can, not talk about the downside of anything because they're essentially salesmen. And that's how I view them. But luckily they're few and far between, you know, and things are getting better and hopefully we'll turn the ship around a little bit.
Well, Erin, I really appreciate your time. It's been a lot of fun speaking with you.
Yeah. Hopefully we didn't bore everybody to death with stereo stuff.
If they've made it this far,
it's very true.
I don't believe we have.
That's true.
Please go visit Erin at ErinsAudioCorner.com. Links are below for anything that he's talked about that I think is of interest.
Yeah, and don't make fun of my page because my webpage was built by me. This, again, a non-professional doing the best he can.
Understood. Well, I think that went really well.
Well, I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for listening. Find us on YouTube and Facebook at The Intellectual People Podcast and online at theintellectualpeoplepodcast.com. Check back for exciting new episodes.